the train station from the back. This is where the train used to come in before they had Corona. And then you walked up the rampway, up the steps here. These rampway. And right here is the El Tovar. This is the part of the El Tovar that hangs out and overlooks the train station. You can see the sign right up there, and that's the front entrance where we went in. We're actually on the other side of the building where we're staying at. But boy, what a difference Corona has made. There's still a lot of tourists here, but as far as amenities, pretty much nothing. "115 years after being completed, and as Jan walks through the front doors of this hotel, I'm thinking we have never stayed in a more beautiful place and a more welcome place. In the time that we spent here, I never saw these doors shut. Anyone or anything that wanted to walk in could do so. One thing I will warn about is that if you've never been to the El Tovar before, and we had not, and you're coming in at night, and we did, you're pretty much destined to get lost. The roads in the little village are extremely narrow and extremely dark, and they're one way. Should you miss your turn, you're going to have to loop all the way around. The Forest Service signs painted in dark brown are very difficult to read. Do yourself a favor, come during the day, and during the time of COVID, bring your mask. It will be enforced." Fred Harvey is credited with creating the first restaurant chain in the United States, as he endeavored to set up restaurants and hotels along the railway lines of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, and other railroads. One of those was the El Tovar, situated on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Unfortunately, Harvey died in 1901, so he never even got to see the groundbreaking ceremony in 1903. The El Tovar was completed in 1905, 3 years prior to the Grand Canyon becoming a national monument in 1908. Didn't become a national park till 1919. Originally 103 rooms with 21 baths, now 78 rooms with each one having a private bath. The room rate for one of those 103 rooms in 1905 was $3 a day. Now it's a little over 100 times that. Yep, having your own bathroom can be pricey. And the artwork and the chairs and everything here is just beautiful, just immaculate. What a nice place. What a nice place. I think that even the moose up there probably likes it. What do you think about this guy up here, huh? Like this place, Moose? Face covering is required. Meg, keeping your distance, second nature. Social distancing is required. In a face covering, second nature, wear a face covering is required. Totally understandable. Arizona's getting hit hard with it. And of course, right now, right here with me, I am wearing a mask. Can't tell who I am, can you? We've got a gift shop over here. It's very nice. Got some nice little displays here. Turquoise jewelry, that kind of stuff. I guess that's what they mostly sell. Got some nice squash blossoms in here. Oh, look at that. Isn't that pretty? Very nice stuff. You always see this around where the Indians reservations are. I had asked our Porter security guy about any paranormal stories that he might have heard during the years, and he kind of chuckled and said no, but then after he carried my luggage up 3 flights of stairs and I tipped him, he suddenly came forth with this information about a lady in red.
Tell you the truth, usually around midnight, right in the corner of your eye is a lady with a red dress.
There's no water.
Where at?
This upstairs, every corner, going to the restroom, everything.
There's no water
There's
in the
no
vending
water.
machine.
Is there water anywhere that we can get?
Yeah, there's we don't give out no water bottles, only canteens, so you get the water faucets right there. If you
Okay.
have water can or something, or canteen.
I got one bottle. Okay, we'll figure
Well,
something
I
out.
have a...
Now, there's another important point to bring up for first-time visitors. You cannot buy bottled water at the Grand Canyon. You have to bring your own container, or you can go to a gift shop and buy a rather expensive container. I'm guessing the reason is that they don't want the chance that the plastic bottles would be discarded on the ground and then blow over into the canyon itself.
We can get one in the car.
As I said, we wound up on the 3rd floor. When we booked, they did not allow us to pick a particular room, not that we would have known the difference anyway. According to what our porter told us, we should be at prime turf in order to see the lady in red, but that is a common thing among most old hotels, so I am not anticipating it. Well, no elevator in this hotel. Well, the room's not very big, but it's stylish. And it looks out over the rotunda, I believe. There are 12 Arizona State death certificates attached to the El Tovar Hotel from the time from when it was built up to 1960, when our access to the records ends. All of them clearly identify the El Tovar Hotel as the place where death occurred. The first recorded death was a young lady, 30 years old, Elsie Erlandsen from Norway, who died suddenly from hemorrhage of the lungs. Elsie died May 3rd, 1909, just 4 years after the hotel was built. Of course, hemorrhage of the lungs means that the lungs start bleeding profusely on their own, and if you could guess tuberculosis, I think it'd be your right guess. If you think the current COVID-19 is bad, by the beginning of the 19th century, 1 in every 7 people born had died of tuberculosis. Elsie's death notification in the Williams paper states that she was an employee of the El Tovar, a laundress, which means she was there at least somewhat long term. Her death was sudden and she did die on the premises. There is no mention in this notification of tuberculosis. Of course, they wouldn't do that. But since she was long term, the death was sudden, and she was living on the property, there's a good chance that there is an attachment here. This may be Our Lady in Red that the security guy talked about. As I said, this phantom in red phenomena is commonly reported in hotels. We have developed a theory as to why that is, where it comes from. We believe that apparitions, ghosts, holograms, whatever you want to call them, broadcast and materialize from an area on the electromagnetic spectrum somewhere between microwaves and radio waves. Whether they have created their own bandwidth is what we're trying to determine. As they increase their frequency, they would move into the visible light bandwidth and become visible. Dropping back out of it, the lowest frequency of visible light is red, and that's what we would see them as, and then vanish from our sight, although they are still there. When I observed the apparition of a cowboy at the Vendome Hotel in Prescott, which is in one of the previous videos where I talk about it, he turned a very crimson bright red just before he vanished right in front of my eyes. So I personally have seen this, and for those of you who don't know what color red I'm talking about, this is what it looks like. Now, I did not take this photo. It's an online stock photo from someone who thought they had captured an apparition. I don't know where it was taken at. I don't know what it was taken of. But I can tell you that the color red in the color spectrum is correct. The color red in this photograph is exactly the color that you will see if you happen to encounter one of these ladies in red or a man on fire walking down a hallway. Whether you're in a hotel or a building, I don't care. If you see something that looks this color, you better start filming, because you're going to miss the chance of a lifetime if you don't. And it doesn't have to be an old structure where you might encounter something like this. Almost all of the certificates list the people that stayed here as transient, meaning that they were guests of the hotel, or it lists their time staying in the hotel by the hour. 2 of them were listed with long-term stay. One, a cattleman, was listed as having stayed at the hotel for 10 years. The other, a hotel employee who in 1954 had been employed for 8 years and fell down the back steps of the hotel, breaking his head open. His contributing factor was listed as acute alcoholism. Not only that, but the date of the death was December 19th, when the back stairs probably were covered with ice. And there you go. The only ice that mixes well with alcohol is the ice cubes in the drink. As investigators in this field of study, what we look for is something that occurred that would hold an attachment to the property. This guy that fell down the back steps, would he have an emotional attachment? Maybe, but probably not. And certainly the two that passed on after him were just transient like the others. Logically, following the natural progression, there have to be other deaths that occurred after 1960 that we're unable to account for. We found other death certificates attached to the Bright Angel Lodge and some of the other places, including the men's dormitory up there at the Grand Canyon. But we stayed at El Tovar, and that's what we were concerned with. There is one death certificate attached to the property, which I skated over and we're coming back to right now. That's because the death didn't actually occur on the property itself, but yet I can guarantee you it holds an attachment for the property. This is probably where some of the activity in the hotel is coming from. On July 17, 1951, Ira Brown, a resident of Big Springs, Texas, was shot in the lobby of the El Tovar Hotel. The reason of how the injury occurred as listed on the certificate was an attempted holdup of the El Tovar Hotel. But although being shot in the lobby, he didn't die there. He lived for 2 days and died in a hospital in Flagstaff. The confusion comes from books written about the Grand Canyon that are available in the gift shops of the canyon itself, such as the ever-popular Over the Edge Death in the Grand Canyon by Michael P. Giglieri and Thomas M. Myers. On page 547, they recount how Brown tried to rob the desk clerk of $12,000 and was shot in the process. They also give the newspaper article that they got the information from, which obviously neither one of them read because that is absolutely inaccurate. The first tip-off should have been the amount taken. $12,000, a desk clerk having $12,000 in front of him in 1951, that amount alone is absurd to think about. That's because it wasn't a robbery, it was a burglary. And there was no desk clerk involved. But if that's the only gaffe in the book, don't let that stop you from buying it. I think it's a great book. I have 2 copies myself. It makes for great reading for a bedtime story. The actual story, as recounted by the newspapers of the day, presents a much more accurate drawing of what happened, and it's much more interesting. The kind of stuff that we look for and presents a possible clear attachment to the property. Giglieri and Myers did get one thing right, the name of the suspect. His name was Bert Brown. Not Ira Brown, as it says on the death certificate. That was the name of his father. On July 15, 1951, 3 men, Bert Brown, John Harris, and Charles Reed, all from the Big Springs, San Angelo, Texas area, drove all night long in order to get to the hotel there at the El Tovar and the Grand Canyon. All 3 were out on bond for previous charges, and 2 of them had been suspected of committing a murder the previous year. Bert Brown, a disabled World War II veteran because of a hand injury, was the ringleader. Their ultimate goal? Break into the El Tovar payroll office and crack the safe. It was Bert's car they drove up in and Bert's tools. The other 2 were apparently grunt men. Brown was a Winslow native prior to World War II and apparently knew the layout of the hotel. A special Santa Fe Railroad police officer, Jack Murray, while on routine patrol of the El Tovar, found the 3 huddled in a corner down next to the payroll office. Gosh, in this photo, Murray looks like he's about 16. Seeing a panel knocked out of the door, he pulled his weapon and ordered them to stand down. Harris and Reed sprouted wings and flew away out the rear exit, but Brown was captured. Apparently it's hard to run with a bad hand. They had apparently been working on the safe for a while because it was already cracked and the money was gone. Murray marched Brown out with his hands in the air towards the main entrance. There's apparently an area down there in the basement where there used to be some swing doors like saloon doors, and Murray ordered him to walk through first, and as he did, he pushed one of the doors back against the officer, knocking him off balance. He ran for a side exit. Whether instinctively or on purpose, Murray fired his weapon and went through the door and struck Brown in the back. The other 2 got away in Brown's car, but they did leave their tools in the payroll office. Apparently, Brown didn't think the bullet wound was that severe. He wouldn't provide them with any information, even give them a fake license plate number and vehicle description. But when they got around, I guess, to playing good cop, bad cop and pointed out to him that he probably needed to get to a hospital and they were going to take him unless he told them what kind of the vehicle it was, he told them that it was his vehicle and gave him the plate number. The other 2 made it as far as Cameron before they ran out of gas, like they didn't know that they should have had gas before they drove out there in the first place. And they parked the car and they hiked up a hill and went to sleep under a tree where they were captured the next day with the money. According to the picture, it looks like it's in a trash can or something that they carted it off in. And all of the cops huddled together and got their pictures taken for the newspaper. Wow, that's a motley-looking crew. While Bert Brown lay in the hospital dying. And 2 days later, he did die. at a hospital in Flagstaff, not at the Grand Canyon. So why were we intrigued by this? Why might there be an attachment to the hotel? Well, let me pose a question to you, the viewer, because so far when I've done this, everybody's pretty much come up with the same answer, some quicker than others. Picture this. 3 guys from Texas, already out on bond for previous crimes, jump in a car, drive all day, all night long in order to get to a hotel on the edge of the Grand Canyon. I already told you, it's very dark up there at night. They know exactly where to park, where the rear entrance is to get into. Every little detail was reported in the paper, but there is no mention that that door was kicked in or breached in any way, so they knew that it was either unlocked or they had a key to get into it. They knew where the payroll office was, and they knew the type of safe because they knew what tools they had to bring to get into it. They had already stolen money and were retrieving their tools at the time that the one monkey in the wrench caught them, that 16-year-old cop. And lastly, no gas. They couldn't even make it to Cameron on Highway 64. They came knowing that they were going to have to spend the night somewhere in the park. So after that being laid out, if you're saying to yourself, whoa, inside job, well, you're right on par with everybody else. And I think the cops figured that out also. But even though they managed to lean on Brown enough to get the description of the automobile, he never did find out who it was on the inside that was helping him out, so I think that inside man was an inside gal. I think Brown thought that that wound wasn't that bad, that he was going to undergo surgery, spend a couple of weeks in the hospital, get out on bond, go see his gal. He never got a chance. He never got a chance to even say goodbye. There's the attachment. So the next thing in store was to try to find the location where all this took place at. This is from our floor, which is the 3rd floor going down. Now, if you notice the steps here, they're very small, which means that this is the period when they were made. This hotel was originally made in 1905. The people were much shorter, and their footfall was a lot different than what ours are. Now our feet will hardly fit in these steps. As you look down at my foot, you can see that it overextends quite a bit. You really have to hold onto the railing and be careful not to fall going down. At least I do. And that's typical of these old hotels. Going down to the 2nd level where this alcove is cut out, and there's a seating area here. Got my hands full of equipment, so I'm taking these stairs one at a time. So this is, I filmed earlier, there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's an octagon cut out here. You can see down into the floor below. It's a master architecture from the Fred Harvey Company at its finest when it was built. So this is the check-in area here. We've got glass partitions all the way around because of what's going on with the coronavirus right now, and we've got a little slot here. Like when we checked in, you had to slide your ID through and have them check it. They won't make contact with you. These are the stairs right across from registration that go down, and this is the only place I can see where you have a basement going down. To your left, as I go down there, there's a back entrance goes out to the back parking lot. Even though there is an auxiliary entrance coming in down below from the employee parking lot, you can see the light shining in the door where it goes out. This area just doesn't quite fit. The swinging doors that have been removed would have had to have been right here where I'm standing. How dangerous would that be that you walk through swinging doors and there's steps on the other side? So it had to have been further down. There must be another area that I haven't seen yet. I talked to the security guy just a minute ago, and he told me that there's one more exit from the outside to come in, but that it's restricted to the public, and I guess it's very small, and I guess it comes up through this area right here anyway. And now they've redone all of this area down here, and as we look, the one door that the guys would have escaped through is right here. That can't be the door that the 2 cohorts ran out through. They would have easily been shot in the back, but it could be the one that Brown managed to escape through. Which means those swinging doors would have been down here somewhere. Now have the public restrooms is where it should have been. This is probably where the payroll area was, right here where it says employees only. Probably where they're looking. Probably the safe was right back in there. After being told not more than a half hour earlier that this was an inaccessible part to guests, while roaming the hallways, I ran across another one of the employees who told me that, yeah, we can go back there. I don't see it's a big deal. Now, I'm not certain that's accurate, so I have decided not to show this employee's image or let management hear their voice. And I'm not out to get somebody in trouble. Just say that I managed to do my investigation work and get back here and take a peek at what it looked like. And this is what it looks like. It's pretty impressive, very, very large. Long ways to the back doorway. After seeing the layout, I am convinced that this is where that incident occurred. This has to be the doorway where 2 of the 3 suspects escaped out of. The third, the one that got shot, was taken into custody. Couldn't figure out how they managed to run without the officer, that had corralled them. He came down. I've got the newspaper reports from it. And he came down and was apparently an off-duty Santa Fe railroad police officer. This fits the exact description of the corner the officer came around. The payroll office had to be right in this area. Going back out, right past here is where those swinging doors had to have been at. Well, one down, one to go. There is another homicide that occurred on the property at a later period. I'll try to make this one brief. On the evening of June 8, 1984, 45-year-old Robert L. Hinkle, one of the Canyon mule wranglers, shot and killed John Leeds Lane Jr., a cardiac computer salesman from Cockeysville, Maryland, in the El Tovar Lounge. So here's the gist of that story. Mr. Mule Wrangler doesn't like his job. I don't know why. Personally, I think that'd be kind of a cool job, taking people up and down the canyon by mule, looking at the sunsets, all the animals. But I guess for every job you can find that 100 guys want, there's at least one that doesn't want it. Mrs. Wrangler, whose name was Carol, just happened to be a hostess at the restaurant. She doesn't like the fact that Mr. Wrangler doesn't like his job any longer, and she's told him that she's going to leave him. She told him that very morning, in fact. Mr. Computer Salesman and his fiancée are transients at the hotel. You remember those people. I told you that there are people that come in, spend one day, and then leave. He's due in Los Angeles the next day to start a new job. As a hotel transient, they're there for one reason, to have a great time. They basically show up, look at the canyon, do a little hiking, look at the canyon, have some drinks, go to their room, make love, have some drinks, go to their room, back and forth, back and forth. They have a great time. They're there to have fun. They eat dinner in the restaurant, and after the restaurant closes, they go to the cocktail lounge / piano bar, which adjoins the restaurant, to sit down and have some drinks, and Mrs. Wrangler, after she gets off shift, joins them. There's about 10 people in there, and everybody's having fun, except for Mr. Wrangler when he walks in. He's been drinking all day and had just come from another lounge where he got into it with another Wrangler that he works with, and ended up sticking a cigarette in the guy's face, which is almost prophetic. He sidles up next to his wife and then starts getting into her face about her leaving him, at which point Mr. Computer Salesman says something like, "Hey, come on, lighten up, we're here to have fun." And Mr. Wrangler looks at him and says, "You're nothing, you're not a big shot, you're just a jackass," to which the Computer Salesman says, "Well, if I'm one, you're one too." Mr. Wrangler reaches around his back, pulls out a .357 Magnum, and shoots Mr. Computer Salesman in the face. I don't know, maybe he thought it was a long-barreled cigarette. A customer who was playing a violin along with a piano player jumped up and disarmed Mr. Wrangler, and everybody ran out of the bar except for Mr. Computer Salesman, because he's dead, and Mr. Wrangler, who decided that he's going to sit there and finish his beer and see how long it takes for the police to arrive. I don't know how long he had to wait, but for the record, they did show up and arrest him. Mr. Wrangler is bound over for trial. His lawyer describes him as Jekyll and Hyde, which means he's both good cop and bad cop. Personally, I think he was more Hyde. Now, wait, was that the bad one or the good one? I can't remember. Mr. Wrangler's blood alcohol content was described as .18, 3.5 hours after the incident when it was tested. And he's convicted in the court of public opinion. I love this article. Look, it says, "Man pleads guilty" in the title. And then if you read it, it says, "A Grand Canyon mule wrangler pleaded innocent." Wow, that guy's bucking for editor position. He gets convicted of second-degree murder, has to spend 21 years in jail, so that takes the problem of him being a wrangler. And he also has to pay $2 million in a judgment. Now, that was just symbolic, because the real suit that's coming up is against AmFac Hotels and Resorts, which owns the El Tovar, because both Mr. and Mrs. Wrangler were employees. The obituary back in Maryland from Mr. Lane simply says that he died suddenly. Yeah, a bullet in the face, they usually do that to you. So, possible attachment to the property? Well, if you were sitting somewhere having a great time, a few drinks, sitting with someone whom you were about ready to get married to, and starting another job the next day, a brand new job, and somebody shot you in the face, would you be pissed off? I would. The cocktail lounge was closed when we were there because of COVID-19, but I did take a peek in. They had all the chairs piled up. It's very, very small. If they had a piano in there, it basically took up the whole room. So I'm just going by the newspaper reports. The only place we actually saw a piano was up on the second floor. With a little lull on the player piano, I decided to try to do a K2 EMF session. Not much up here, that's for certain. Once I turned the device coil away from the player piano, it picked up very little. I don't know if this is the bar piano that was moved up here, but the location definitely doesn't fit. A long first evening setting the equipment up and traipsing around the hotel, seeing where I can access and where I couldn't, we found ourselves willing and ready to go to bed early in the morning. Here's the setup we've got going. We have the usual monitor. I've got the DVR and the audio monitor there. One camera placed here. We've got the camera lines run out. Got one camera up on top of the shelf here, up on top of the MWA, along with the microphone is up there. Down here, we put another camera looking into the bathroom area. And then we've got on over here, we've got a camera and got one REM pod there. On the other side over here, we've got the other REM pod. We're going to put our rangefinder against the wall, and it says that lengthwise it is 11 feet 4 inches. So then we want to take the other direction, put it over here, and we're going to do the same thing if I can find a good spot there. There's 12 feet 2 inches, which means that this room is about as small as the room that we had at the Amargosa Opera House in Death Valley. These rooms obviously go back to the time when this hotel was built. 1905 when Harvey started building it. At that time there was no indoor plumbing, so the bathroom here that I'm looking at was an add-on. The room was a little bigger at that time, but they're quite small. This is a very small room. I had a hard time setting the equipment up. At 1 o'clock we leave to go downstairs to the restaurant to have lunch. And 3 minutes later, we're back when we find out that there's a 40-minute wait because they are the only restaurant in the Grand Canyon. 20 minutes later, we're back out the door again to go down and check our remaining time. They said they would not call the room and let us know. And that's how it's going to be if you come up here during COVID-19. 40-minute wait for breakfast and lunch, 2-hour wait for dinner. No exceptions. That being done, welcome to the Grand Canyon. The peacefulness of the night, and the pandemia of day. We're waiting for lunch here amongst all of the other people. This place is packed. There's only 2 places here in the park during this corona epidemic where you can actually get something to eat. Would not recommend coming here, that's for sure. El Tovar Lodge. And looking outside to the Grand Canyon. Yeah, it's raining. One time we come up here and it's raining. Back in the room, a REM pod is going off. REM pod A, as I call it, is the newer REM pod. It has a red light on top to signify how strong the battery is. Once the pod is activated, it flashes along with the other lights. 5 progressive lights indicate the strength of the interruption, as well as equipped with a fairly large chirper producing audible. This is our first verified indication of activity in the hotel. Short of placing a fluorescent light over the top of it or bringing a walkie-talkie within a foot of it, there is nothing normal that can set it off. I have sped the remainder of this clip up 7 times so that we can see that within 3 minutes and 10 seconds, the battery of this unit is drained and the red light goes out completely. For those of you who are not investigators, this is a very good capture. It's oftentimes that batteries are drained, but very rare that we capture one being drained and the time frame is drained in by surveillance. Is the El Tovar haunted? Yes, indeedy. Wow. Isn't that pretty? That's the result of the rainfall that we just went through here. Waiter at our table told us it hadn't rained in months. Of course not, because we're here. Look way down there. You can see there's some cabins way down there. The light in the canyon after the rain from the back of the El Tovar Lodge. Outstanding.
It's separate from the actual camera.
You want to get in it? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Two outstanding things to look at. Right over there, the canyon across over there, there's some sheep, like 4 of them, that are walking that ledge. And that's what I want to do, is walk that ledge just like they can. Mountain goats, mountain sheep, I can't tell the difference. I know they're walking up those rocks, and I wish I could do it. Like 6 of them there now. But he walks across that like nothing. He's like, yeah, just a little drop. As beautiful as this canyon setting is, I don't understand why some people think of it as the proverbial elephant's graveyard. You know, this is where we come to die kind of thing. And yet they do. Hordes of them. Many of them come alone. Some bring their families. At least one was boarding at the El Tovar before that fateful event. Probably more if we were to isolate all of the news clippings. Could any of them have left an attachment? Maybe, depending on the items left in the room, but the point of angst is actually where they jumped off, not in the room itself. Now here's one which raised an eyebrow with me. An 18-year-old girl, a maid at the El Tovar, attempted to take a head dive at night into the canyon. Her girlfriend said it was because she caught her boyfriend cheating on her. But remember that theory about the holdup at the El Tovar and the possible inside man that I said was probably an inside woman? The date for this attempted suicide was August 2nd, 1951, just a scant 2 weeks after the holdup, and the shooting death of Bert Brown. The Indian village she hails from is up past Cameron, where the other 2 guys were captured at, and the back route to Winslow, where Brown had raised. But we can't point a finger at her just because of a string of coincidences. It may be very well true that it was her boyfriend that caused her to do it. Although the police did say that if there was one, he didn't come to visit her in the hospital. There are so many deaths that every year the local newspaper has to publish a public notice on the property that's going to be disposed of that was left behind. I don't know if they sell it or if they just have to get rid of it, but if you're interested, you might give them a call. Check out the samurai swords that they had to get rid of. In 2010, a Phoenix newspaper published the results that the Grand Canyon National Park ranked number 2 in suicides in national parks. Number 2? Wonder who number 1 was. If you guessed Lake Mead Hoover Dam being number 1, as I did, well, then you were wrong, just as I was. No, that came in number 3, and number 1 was the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. Who would have ever thought that? Maybe Giglieri and Myers ought to do a book on that one. Later that evening, the cell sensor unit in the bathroom started going off, and it didn't quit until I went in to check on it. Hey, there you go. What are you doing? Huh? What's going on? Huh? As soon as I looked at it, it quit. A few minutes later, while trying to do a test EVP session with this Ghost Buddy Boo Bear thing that I bought to see how it would work out, the cell sensor in the bathroom was going off the whole time.
I'm just going to turn the recorder off. I'll get back with you, and we're going to play the Tascam back and see if anything responds to any of the questions that he asked. So we'll be right back momentarily.
Do you know what time it is?
It's time to turn off this recorder for a moment. GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, turn off.
Not stopping. You hear that? Do you want to be my friend? Yes?
You have some speed there now, ain't you, huh? That's interesting. GoPro, turn on. GoPro, start recording. And now it goes off. Isn't that something?
Do you want to hold my hand?
During the course of this evening, this cell sensor unit in the bathroom would go off a total of 32 times. The other 2 cell sensors in the room never went off a single time, which left me to draw some conclusions from all of it. I decided to move the REM pod into the bathroom and see how that interacted with it. The Ghost Bear Boo Buddy thing, pretty much a toy. I intend to do a later review on that independently. We're getting most of our activity here in the bathroom. As we leave the room for the day, I've moved the REM pod over here to the bathroom floor, where cell sensor there on the shelf is what's going off pretty much all night long, and it varies in frequency. In addition to that bathroom cell sensor, REM pod B, the older REM pod that I have, also kept going off, but just one light, so I wasn't certain that that was malfunction or not. I just took the battery out of it so that we could get some sleep. When I ran the surveillance back, I could see that the cell sensor unit in the bathroom kept going off during the day when we were out, and yet the REM pod never went off once. That presents a problem in itself. We did, however, have a visitor. Look, here's his eyes. Aw, it's a little mouse with really big ears. That's right. Just $353 a night for a truly American frontier experience, and we'll throw in the mouse for free. Well, I'm just like you. When I first saw it, I thought, what the? And then I had to call Jan because she didn't believe it either unless she saw it. I had over 200 hunts in almost 150 hotels across the entire United States. This is the first time that we've ever captured a rodent in the room on our surveillance system. That's not to say that we haven't found everything else imaginable, either in the room or in the hallways. Bats up under the eaves, birds in the hallways, reptiles in the hallways, insects, hordes of insects, all kinds. In fact, here's some footage of a really nifty moth that we captured just a couple of hours after the mouse. I do want to say that this was a very polite little mouse. He didn't jump up on the bed and try to scare us or jump into a trash can and rummage around, making me think that the trash can was haunted. I played the tape back. I was kind of curious to see exactly where he came from. We can see he comes out from underneath the bed, apparently, but I'm not really certain because part of the area is not covered. And then he heads on down to the bathroom. He goes under the armoire there. He heads on down to the bathroom, and then he comes back after checking that area out. And then he goes back underneath the armoire a couple of times, and then disappears. The little space underneath the door leading into the hallway is tall enough for him to have slipped under, and certainly I would have kind of figured that, considering they never locked the outside doors or even shut them up. But my guess is since he goes under the armoire there and basically vanishes, I think he's probably coming through a hole in the wall where they put the cable in for the TV, something of that nature, and he's just allowed to move from one wall to another, one room to another by that system. At no time did this little guy ever pose a threat to us. He doesn't show it all in the footage from the other two cameras, one of them actually showing us in the bed area, which means that he didn't come around the bed anywhere when he came in. So now curiosity got the better of me, and I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about this guy. Let's zoom in on him and take a peek. Here he comes. Those big ears are his trademark. He's what's called a pinyon mouse. He's native to this area, and even though he's a cousin to the ones that probably get in your cabots and hunt for your Cheerios, this guy prefers a very specialized diet. This little guy prefers insects and vertebrates like earthworms, nuts, berries, and fungi, none of which we brought into the room with us, other than that moth you saw. So why did we get privileged with the visit? Turns out there's something else he needs a lot of. Water. And their numbers have greatly declined up here because the hotels and infrastructure have taken all the water. He knew exactly where he was going, right into the bathroom to see if there was a puddle of water that we'd left from taking a shower, something of that nature. Not finding it, he came out and moved on to the next room. Now I felt a little sad, not so much for him because he's learned to adapt, but for us, because us as the humans and the footprint that we leave everywhere we go. Keep in mind, this is their home, and we're just visitors. So in conclusion, how did the El Tovar stack up for us? Well, because of Corona, I'd have to be quite honest, it sucked. We booked for 3 nights at the price of 2 and ended up leaving after 2 anyway because we were just worried about how things were going. But if this virus thing hadn't been going on with all the mask wearing and the long lines and everything, I think it actually would have been wondrous. Where else can you go and be able to see mountain sheep or goats, whatever they are, climbing around in your backyard and watch elk grazing on your front lawn? These are wild animals, folks. Please don't try to pet them or let your kids try to pet them. Never can tell what you're going to see from people. All that, and you might even get a visit from a thirsty little mouse in your room. Just be sure to use a flashlight and put your slippers on when you get out of bed at night. As far as an activity level, it's here. This place is haunted. There is absolutely nothing that can drain the fresh battery of a REM pod in 2 or 3 minutes. Even if you were to place it directly under a fluorescent or neon light source, the one thing you're not supposed to do, it would drain, but it would take some time to do it. The EMF activity that the cell sensor picked up in the bathroom, well, I'm half and half on that one. Normally, in these older hotels, the electrical system was grounded to the plumbing. That's how they did it back then. That was code. You can turn the entire plumbing system into a giant EMF producer. And it seems to tend to increase as people use more water, such as people in other rooms showering, stuff like that, which is why you will pick up most errant EMF activity inside of the bathroom area. You notice the other 2 cell sensors that we had in the room didn't go off once. And the REM pod didn't go off, showing it's not a localized field because it would have detected it. It's a generalized field, which is what you would expect from plumbing. On the other hand, every time I stepped around the corner to try to film it with a GoPro, it stopped. You saw 2 occurrences of it, but it did it several other times, and it's not supposed to do that if it's plumbing. But our first night, the first 24 hours, we captured nothing. So we can't give it a consistent reading because that's our requirements. We have to get at least 1 reading or 1 anomaly once every 24 hours in order for it to be consistent. The captured activity in the bathroom, whether valid or not, would not have boosted our activity level rating. And because it was all recorded metered activity, we consider it to be low. We didn't see any lights turn off or anything move around the room, nothing like that. But there is something here. Where it comes from, I have no idea. And it's not attached to the room we were in. It just seemed to pass through. It goes wherever it wants to, when it wants to. Our given activity level reading is low and sporadic. Our advice, don't come here during Corona. But once this is over with, come up here and book a room. Just tell them, we'd like a room. Hold the mouse, please. If you liked our level of unbiased and factual reporting, please subscribe to our channel. Even if you don't want to watch more videos, you can always go in and hit the do not notify for new videos. But after doing this for years now, I can tell you, you really don't know what YouTube can demand of its contributors. You never know what they're going to do from day to day. So it really helps. I'd kind of like to keep making them. And if you didn't like our video, shh, don't tell anyone.